I'm Rachel, a 45-year-old dentist. 10 years ago, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I married James, a wonderful man who came with a 12-year-old daughter, Emma, from his previous marriage. I had a spacious apartment with several bedrooms, so it made sense for them to move in with me after the wedding. From day one, Emma made it crystal clear she wasn't happy about her father's choice. "Dad," she'd say, right in front of me, "could you tell your wife I'm not hungry?" The way she emphasized "your wife" felt like a slap in the face every time. The first few months were a battlefield. Emma would slam doors, ignore my presence, and throw tantrums that would make the neighbors' heads turn, but I refused to take the bait. Instead of punishing her or fighting back, I chose a different approach. One evening, after another one of her outbursts, I knocked on her door. "Emma," I said through the door, "I'm not here to replace your mother. I'm just hoping we can find our own way to get along." She didn't respond that night, but something changed after that conversation. I started treating her like an adult, not a child who needed to be controlled or corrected. When she'd make snide comments, I'd respond calmly and rationally. If she wanted to discuss something with her father instead of me, that was fine too. "Dad," she said one morning, "Rachel's pancakes actually smell good." It was the first time she'd acknowledged anything positive about me, even if it wasn't said to my face. 2 years after the wedding, things started to shift. The change wasn't dramatic, more like ice slowly melting. Emma began addressing me directly, first with small requests, then with actual conversations. I made sure to include her in everything: family vacations, weekend outings, even silly movie nights at home. "Rachel," she asked one day, using my name for the first time without spite, "can I come with you and Dad to the beach house this summer?" I noticed the biggest improvement came after Emma's mother, Linda, remarried. With her own personal life to focus on, Linda stopped making those little comments that would set Emma against me. The phone calls that used to end with Emma in tears became shorter and more casual. "Mom's different now," Emma told me one evening while we were cooking dinner together. "She seems happier. I guess everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, right?" Those words felt like a peace offering, and I accepted them gratefully. As I watched her stir the pasta sauce, a recipe we'd learned together, I realized we were finally becoming something close to a real family. When Emma got accepted to college, I didn't hesitate to help with the tuition. James and I had discussed it beforehand, and it felt like the natural thing to do. After all, we'd come so far from those early days of slammed doors and silent treatments. The night before she left for college, we sat on her bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes and piles of clothes. I had something important to tell her. "Listen, Emma," I said, "my brother David runs that marketing firm downtown. When you graduate, if you're interested, I'll help you get a position there. It's a great place to start your career." She hugged me then, a real tight hug, not one of those awkward side hugs we used to share. "Really? That would be amazing, Rachel. Thank you." During her college years, we didn't see her as often as we'd like. She'd come home for holidays and occasional weekends, but that's normal for college students. When she did visit, I made sure to cook all her favorites. My lasagna that she'd finally admitted was better than her mom's. Those chocolate chip cookies she used to sneak from the kitchen when she thought I wasn't looking. "How's the business management program?" I'd ask over dinner. "Still enjoying Professor Turner's class?" She'd light up, talking about her studies, her internships, her plans for the future. Sometimes, mid-conversation, she'd mention visiting her mom. "I stopped by Mom's place last weekend," she'd say, then quickly add, "Oh, but you should see the project I'm working on for my marketing class." I never pushed when she changed the subject like that. Why would I? It was perfectly natural for her to spend time with her mother. Even James agreed. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm during these visits. Emma would tell us about her classes, her friends, her part-time job at the campus coffee shop. I'd cook her favorite meals, and we'd all sit around the dining table like we used to, sharing stories and laughing together. "You know," Emma said during one of these dinners. "My roommate can't believe how lucky I am to have such a cool stepmom. She's always complaining about hers." Those words meant more to me than she probably realized. After all those years of struggle, hearing her casually refer to me as cool felt like winning an Olympic medal. James squeezed my hand under the table, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Emma lingered in the kitchen longer than usual. "Rachel," she said, fidgeting with a dish towel, "thanks for everything, not just the college thing, but, everything. Time has a way of sneaking up on you. One day you're helping your stepdaughter move into her college dorm, and the next thing you know, she's wearing a cap and gown, receiving her diploma." As I watched Emma walk across the stage, I couldn't help but think about the apartment key sitting in my purse, waiting to change her life. The apartment had been my grandmother's. It wasn't huge, a cozy 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, but it was perfect for a young professional starting out. I'd been renting it out for years, but now I had different plans for it. Emma was chatting animatedly from the back seat about her friends' post-graduation plans. "Sarah's moving to Chicago, and Mike got that job in Boston. It's weird how everyone's spreading out across the country." I caught James's eye and smiled. She had no idea she wouldn't have to go anywhere. When we got home, I could barely contain my excitement. I'd asked the last tenants to move out a month ago and had the whole place professionally cleaned and painted. Everything was ready. "Emma," I said as we settled in our living room, "I have something for you." My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out the keys attached to a small silver keychain with her initials. "What's this?" she asked, taking the keys with a puzzled expression. "An apartment," I said simply. "My grandmother's old place. It's yours now." The room went completely silent. Emma stared at the keys in her hand, then at me, then back at the keys. James's mouth had dropped open. Are you serious?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Completely serious. You'll need your own place now that you're starting your career, maybe even a family someday." I pulled out my phone to show her pictures. "It's on Cedar Street, number 542. Everything's ready for you to move in whenever you want." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She lunged at me, wrapping her arms around my neck like she used to do when she was younger. "Rachel, I can't believe this, thank you." James was next, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I love you," he whispered in my ear. "You're amazing. You know that?" Emma was already grabbing her coat. "Can I go see it right now?" I laughed and gave her the address again, making sure she had it right. "Of course! The keys work on both the building entrance and the apartment door. Take your time exploring. I think I'll stay there tonight," she said excitedly. "Is that okay? I want to get a feel for my new home." After she left, James and I curled up on the couch together. The house felt oddly quiet without her bustling energy. "Just think," I said, resting my head on his shoulder. "Someday she'll meet someone special and they'll make that place their first home together." James kissed the top of my head. "And then we'll be grandparents and you'll spoil our grandkids just like you've spoiled our daughter." Our daughter. The words made my heart swell. After all these years, all the struggles and tears and slow, unfolding trust, she really had become my daughter in every way that mattered. I was enjoying my day off, still basking in the warmth of yesterday's happiness, when my front door burst open with a bang that made me jump. Linda, Emma's mother, stormed in like a hurricane. "How dare you!" she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "Who do you think you are?" I stood up from the couch, my heart pounding. "Linda, what's wrong?" "Don't play innocent with me. Emma told me about your little gift." "An entire apartment, really?" She was practically spitting the words. "You think you can buy my daughter's love?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's not what this is about at all," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I inherited that apartment from my grandmother." "Oh, how convenient." Linda cut me off, pacing our living room like a caged animal. You just happened to have a spare apartment lying around and you just had to give it to my daughter, knowing full well I could never match such an expensive gift. Linda, please. I attempted to explain, my hands raised in a pleading gesture. I love Emma. She's like a daughter to me. I just wanted to help her start her adult life. Love her? Linda's laugh was harsh and bitter. You've been trying to replace me since day one. First with the fancy vacations, then paying for her college, and now this. She stepped toward me, her hand raised, and I instinctively stepped back. Before anything could happen, James appeared from nowhere, grabbing Linda's wrist. That's enough! His voice was firm. You need to leave now! Linda yanked her arm free, her eyes blazing with hatred. This isn't over, Rachel. You think you're so generous, so perfect. Well, you can't buy a mother's love. Emma will always be my daughter, not yours, no matter how many apartments you throw at her. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. I stood frozen in place, my whole body trembling. James tried to pull me into an awkward embrace, but I couldn't relax into it. My mind was racing, replaying Linda's words over and over. Had I really been trying to buy Emma's love all these years? Was that what everyone thought? She's wrong, James said softly, but something in his voice sounded uncertain. You know she's wrong, right? I nodded mechanically, but inside I felt like my whole world had started to crumble. 10 years of building trust, of careful steps forward and occasional steps back, all reduced to accusations of bribery and manipulation. I gripped the kitchen counter to steady myself. Emma, what's going on? Is this because of what happened with your mother the other day? My real mother, she corrected, emphasizing each word like a weapon. And yes, she doesn't want you there, neither do I. I don't understand. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my legs suddenly weak. If this is about the apartment? She let out a harsh laugh that made me flinch. Oh, I'm keeping the apartment. I mean, who turns down a free place to live? Consider it payment for all the years I had to put up with you and your perfect stepmom act. The room seemed to spin. Put up with me? Emma, what are you talking about? Have you been suffering all this time? God, you really don't get it, do you? She stood up, pushing her chair back with a screech against the tile floor. I never loved you. You were just the woman who made sure my parents could never get back together. If you hadn't shown up, they might have worked things out. We could have been a real family again. Each word felt like a physical blow. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed up helping her with homework, all the times I'd held her while she cried over boys, all the mother-daughter moments I thought we'd shared. Real family? My voice cracked. What do you think we've been for the last 10 years? All those vacations we took together, the college tuition? Yeah, throwing money around. That's your solution to everything, isn't it? She sneered, and the expression looked so foreign on her face. Fancy trips, expensive gifts, paying for college, and now an apartment. Did you think you could just buy yourself a daughter? That's not what I was trying to do. I could feel tears starting to form, but I blinked them back. I did those things because I love you, because I thought we were family. Family? She laughed again, that horrible mocking laugh. My mom is my family. Dad is my family. You're just the woman who came along and ruined everything. And now you're trying to buy my love with an apartment. I felt like I couldn't breathe. All those years. Was any of it real? The party's on Sunday at 7, she said instead of answering, walking toward her room. Don't show up. You're not welcome. The door slammed so hard the photos on the wall rattled. Photos of us, at her high school graduation, at Christmas, at the beach. Moments I treasured that now felt like elaborate lies. The coffee in my mug had long gone cold, but I couldn't bring myself to dump it out. It felt like dumping out the last 10 years of my life. That evening, I waited for James to come home, my hands shaking as I rehearsed how I'd tell him about Emma's cruel words. When he finally walked through the door, the story spilled out between sobs I couldn't control. "I'll talk to her," he said immediately, heading straight to Emma's room without even taking off his coat. I sat in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, waiting. The minutes crawled by like hours. When James finally emerged, I looked up expectantly, hoping for support, understanding, anything that would make this nightmare better. Rachel. He wouldn't meet my eyes, and my heart sank before he even finished speaking. "Emma has some valid points. Maybe it would be better if you didn't come to the party." The world stopped spinning in that moment. 10 years of marriage crystallized into perfect clarity. I had been living a lie all along. "You're still going?" My voice sounded distant, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. "Of course, she's my daughter." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like I was stupid for even asking. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Over the next few days, I played the perfect understanding wife. I smiled at breakfast. I made their favorite dinners. I pretended everything was fine while my heart shattered into smaller pieces with each passing hour. Sunday evening, I watched them leave for the party. The moment that car disappeared around the corner, I sprang into action. The locksmith was already waiting at my grandmother's apartment. He worked quickly and efficiently, not asking questions about why I needed the locks changed so urgently. Within 20 minutes, I had new keys in my hand. Back home, I moved like a woman possessed. James's clothes went into suitcases, sorted by season and type, just like I'd always done when we packed for vacations. Everything stacked neatly by the door, ready for his departure from my life. Then I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, my favorite comfort drink since childhood. The familiar, soothing aroma filled the kitchen as I sat down on the couch and opened Instagram. Emma had already posted photos from the party. There she was, sandwiched between James and Linda, all three of them beaming at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. The caption read, "So blessed to be celebrating with the people who truly matter." At midnight, I heard James's key in the lock, his footsteps in the hallway, then silence as he reached the bedroom and saw the suitcases. "Rachel," his voice was sharp with confusion. "What's all this?" I took another sip of my now cold tea. "You need to find somewhere else to live." He laughed. Actually laughed, like this was all some silly joke. "Don't you think you're overreacting? It was just a party." "Just a party?" I set down my cup carefully, the porcelain making a soft clink against the coffee table. "My husband and stepdaughter excluded me from a family celebration. You took her side when she said she never loved me. You watched her treat me like garbage and did nothing." My voice was steady now, certain. "Expect divorce papers this week." The laughter died in his throat. "Now wait a minute. We can fix this." "Fix what?" I interrupted. "The fact that you never loved me? That I was just a convenient replacement mother for your daughter? That you stood by while she threw 10 years of love back in my face?" Before James could respond, the front door burst open with a bang. Emma stormed in, her party dress wrinkled, mascara streaking down her face. "What did you do?" She screamed. "Why can't I get into my apartment?" I took another sip of chamomile tea, my hand steady. "Your apartment? Oh, you mean my grandmother's apartment? You gave it to me. You can't just take it back." "Actually, I can. And I did. And while we're at it, I called my brother this morning. Don't bother applying for that position at his company. I told him you're no longer part of the family." Emma's face crumpled. "That's so cruel. How can you do this to me?" "Cruel." I stood up slowly. "Cruel is pretending to love someone for 10 years. Cruel is taking everything they give you while secretly despising them. Cruel is excluding them from your graduation party and posting photos about your real family." James finally found his voice. "Rachel, you're being unreasonable." "No, I'm being clear. For the first time in 10 years, I turned to face them both. This is my apartment. You are no longer my family. I want you both out. Now. Emma burst into tears and ran to her room. I could hear her slamming drawers and closet doors, crying and cursing as she packed. James kept trying to talk to me, but I turned up the kitchen faucet to drown out his voice. 30 minutes later, Emma emerged with her suitcases, her face red with fury. "You're a horrible person," she spat. "You're worse than I ever thought. I hate you. Goodbye." "Goodbye, Emma," I said calmly. "James, don't forget your golf clubs in the garage." They left, the door closing behind them with a final click. I stood in my silent apartment, breathing deeply for what felt like the first time in days. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Linda called 17 times before switching to texts, each one more hostile than the last. "How dare you take back the apartment, you manipulative witch? I'll sue you for this." James's messages were different, pleading, apologetic. "Please talk to me. We can work this out. I'm sorry about everything." Emma tried both approaches. "I didn't mean what I said. You're ruining my life. Please, Rachel, I'm sorry." I blocked them all without responding. 10 years of manipulation and lies had finally become clear. They'd used me for my money, my apartment, my connections. Well, no more. The divorce proceedings were quick, thanks to our prenuptial agreement. James tried to claim half of my assets, arguing about his contributions to the marriage. His lawyer's face fell when mine produced the prenup James had signed a decade ago. Through mutual friends, I heard they'd found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Emma was struggling to find work without my brother's help. James had to sell his golf club membership to afford the security deposit. The apartment feels bigger now, emptier, but it's mine. Every morning I make my chamomile tea and sit by the window, watching the sunrise. No more cooking elaborate meals for ungrateful family members. No more paying for someone else's dreams. No more pretending. This is my life now, and it's finally, truly mine. Story 2. I never imagined that at the age of 29, I would be standing in front of a stunning 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch, my ideal home. I'm Robin Mitchell, and I've put in a ton of effort to get here. I had saved up enough money for a sizable down payment after working as an investment manager at Sterling & Associates for 5 years. Derek, this is it. As we stood in the driveway, I squeezed my husband's hand and said to him, "What are your thoughts?" Derek's dark eyes wrinkled at the corners as he grinned. "It's ideal, sweetie. You performed well." One of the things I admired most about Derek was that. He never seemed to be alarmed by my success and was always supportive of my career. He didn't even bat an eye when I told him that I wanted to purchase the house with my own funds and register it in my name. "You deserved it," he stated plainly. "In addition, I'm saving money for our future children's college expenses. I take it we're a team?" That day, I recall giving him a strong hug and reflecting on how fortunate I was to have a spouse who understood me so well. Derek was the only person I knew who wouldn't have been upset about their wife purchasing a home. Even though his pay as a high school teacher was far less than mine, he never voiced any complaints or showed jealousy. My smile never left my face the day we moved in. The house fulfilled all of my fantasies. A gourmet kitchen, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a patio that's ideal for future cookouts and kids' birthday celebrations. In order to keep the monthly mortgage payments from putting too much burden on us, I had made sure to put down a sufficient amount of money. I learned the value of living within our means while working as an investment manager. "What should we do? Do you know?" Derek stated as we unpacked boxes in the kitchen. "This weekend we ought to eat supper with my folks. They'll want to view images of the house." "That's a terrific concept," I concurred. "Opening our wedding presents from China. That night we ought to go see my relatives." Derek and I were enjoying the sunset while swinging on our new porch. Everything appeared to be ideal. We discussed our ideas for the house, including which bedroom would serve as the nursery and how we would furnish each room where we would grow a garden in the spring. when our family was born. I felt totally at peace later that night as I laid in bed and listened to Derek's steady breathing next to me. My goal of buying a lovely home had come true. My spouse was devoted to me, and we appeared to have a promising future. As I fell asleep, I reflected on how wonderful everything was. It was intended to be a modest celebration of our new house at that first supper with Derek's parents. George and Martha had always been gentle with me, as if I were their own daughter. 5 years ago, Derek and I began dating. Martha had made her renowned pot roast for the event, and they lived in a little ranch-style home across town. "Tell us all you know about the house." As she passed the mashed potatoes, Martha cried out. She had her gray hair tucked back in a tidy bun as usual. Her eyes glistened with anticipation. I started to respond, but Derek spoke before me. "Actually, I intended to surprise you guys," he continued, his voice full with pride. "I got us this fantastic bedroom home, gorgeous backyard. When you see it, you will fall in love with it." My water almost swallowed me. Derek's eyes begged me to keep silent as he clasped my hand beneath the table. My chest constricted, but I remained silent and faked a grin. "Derek?" "Oh." Martha put her hands together in a clasp. "That's fantastic. George, isn't it wonderful?" George gave his son a smile. "My boy is that. I always knew you would succeed on your own." He faced me. "This husband of yours is really giving, Robin. Nowadays, very few young guys can afford to purchase such a home." As I pushed food about my plate, I gave a robotic nod. My stomach suddenly felt like lead from the pot roast that had smelt so good just moments before. The remainder of the meal was a haze of falsehoods, with Derek explaining how he had saved money for the down payment, his parents complimenting him on his sound financial management, and me sitting there feeling as though I was in a strange parallel universe. Until we arrived into our driveway, or the driveway my money had purchased, the journey home was quiet. What on earth was that? As soon as we entered, I made a demand. I had noticed Derek's uneasy habit of running his hands through his black hair early on in our relationship. "I apologize, Robin. My dad is someone you know. He is traditional. A man residing in a home his wife purchased would be incomprehensible to him. He would die, as well as my reputation. You're standing?" What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Robin, please," he pleaded. "Can we just pretend that I purchased the house? No one is harmed by it. Additionally, it facilitates everyone's life." I shook my head, feeling that this whole situation was ridiculous, but I couldn't bring myself to disagree with him after seeing his beseeching countenance. "All right," I sighed. "Whatever brings you joy." History was reenacted a week later when we sat in my parents' living room. Along with my younger sister Emma, who was visiting from her flat downtown, my parents were present. Emma and I had always been close, despite being different as night and day, while I was the practical one who went into finance. She was the free spirit that went from job to job, attempting to discover herself. "We purchased a home," Derek declared with pride. Well, I did desire to give Robin the home she deserves. Like I was watching a movie, I observed how my family responded. Derek's parents were beaming and congratulating him on his accomplishment. But it was Emma's expression that attracted my attention. With a smile, she congratulated him. However, I was too familiar with my sister to fail to notice the glint of envy in her eyes. She'd always desired the ideal house, the perfect life. I was living her dream right here, or so she believed. I hosted a housewarming party 2 weeks following the family dinners. I'd spent days prepping everything, putting up the new furniture, hanging artwork, and making sure every area looked flawless. The sound of laughter and the aroma of appetizers filled the house as our relatives and friends showed up. Derek buffed out his chest like a proud peacock and told the group, "Let me give you the grand tour. You'll see what I chose for the master bathroom when you wait." I nearly snorted into my glass of wine. The master bathroom. It made him very proud. I had selected every tile, fixture, and even the opulent rainfall showerhead that he adored, but there he was, showing our guests around the house while discussing his plans and how he had worked so hard to make it all possible. The celebration went well, and a comfortable routine was established in life. During the day, Derek and I both worked, spent weekends making our lovely home feel more and more like home after returning home in the evening. Up until precisely 6 months following the housewarming party, everything was ideal. My Sunday afternoon was peaceful when the doorbell rang. Emma was standing there when I opened it, her shoulders trembling from sobs and mascara streaming down her cheeks. "Emma? What's the matter?" I drew her in. Sincere concern. It wasn't easy for my sister to cry. "They cut my hours at work," she choked out, collapsing onto our couch. "I barely... making part-time now, and my rent." She dissolved into fresh tears. I sat beside her, rubbing her back like I used to when we were kids, and she'd had a nightmare. "How bad is it? My flat is no longer within my means." "Robin, I need a place to stay." She looked up at me with those big brown eyes we'd both inherited from our mom. "Can I stay here just until I figure something out?" I paused. "What about Mom and Dad's place? They had that spare room." "Their house is on the other side of town," Emma protested, wiping her eyes. "It would take me forever to get to work from there. Your place is perfect. It's close to everything, and you have all these empty bedrooms." "I don't know, Emma. Let me think about it." She nodded reluctantly, and I promised to call her later, not 10 minutes after she left. My phone rang. It was Mom, Robin. "Your sister just called me crying. She didn't introduce herself. You have to let her stay with you. She's family." That evening, I discussed it with Derek over supper. Emma needs a place to stay. I explained, moving my noodles around my plate. "She's in a bad place with work, and she should remain with us." Derek said immediately, "We have the room, and she's family. It'll be wonderful having her around." I stared at him with amazement. Derek had always gotten along well with Emma, but I hadn't expected him to be so happy about having a house guest. A few days later, Emma moved in. I helped her set up in one of the extra bedrooms, the one with the finest morning light that I'd been hoping to make into a home office. The first few weeks weren't unpleasant at all. In fact, they were quite polite. Dinner would be on the table when I got home from a long day at the investing business. Actual home-cooked meals, not just takeaway or basic spaghetti. The home was immaculate. Emma appeared sincere in her desire to assist, and the laundry was always done. Then, however, things began to shift. At first it was so mild that I questioned whether I was dreaming. At breakfast, Emma would remark, "Here's your coffee, Derek," placing down his mug with a flourish. His coffee was black with a hint of sugar, just the way you want it. "Don't you think Robin always makes it too sweet?" Or she would be commenting while folding clothes. "Before Derek, I observed that your clothing were constantly creased. It makes a huge difference to take a little additional care, do you not think?" The frequent similarities were starting to irritate me, despite my best efforts to ignore them. I called her aside one evening after she made a particularly scathing remark about how she had finally organized the kitchen. "Can we discuss, Emma?" Trying to speak with a level voice, I asked. "You're making these remarks." Her eyes were big and innocent as she gazed at me. "What remarks about improving as a hostess? How much has the house improved since you moved in?" Emma waved her hand dismissively as she laughed. "What a sensitive person you are, Robin. I am only making a joke. Don't act like you're envious of your younger sister's housekeeping." It wasn't only the remarks either. Emma was in the kitchen 2 weeks after I got home from work, dressed in what could hardly be described as clothes, a translucent tank top and small shorts that left little room for interpretation. Derek's eyes kept going up when he was seated at the counter, supposedly working on his laptop. "Emma?" I dragged her into the hallway with a hiss. "What do you have on? This place is hot." She objected, but her grin told him no. "Now go change." Although she rolled her eyes, she obeyed and changed into her usual loungewear. Derek and I were getting ready for bed later that evening. He mentioned it. Do you not feel that you treated Emma a little harshly earlier? As he got into bed, he inquired. She simply feels at ease with her family. I gazed at him. She was all but nude. You're overstating things. In addition, it's her house. Right now. I felt like I was slapped by his comments. Her house. When did that occur? I approached Emma at breakfast the next morning. Have you already begun your flat search? They posed the question directly. She instantly crushed her face. I'm trying, Robin, but with my less hours, I can hardly save anything. Everything is very costly. She is not required to move, Derek interrupted without glancing up from his phone. It's good to have her here and we have lots of space. Together, the three of us are productive. I felt a shudder go down my spine as I glanced between my sister and my husband, her with that little smirk at the corners of her mouth and him casually justifying her existence in my home. The Anderson transaction was significant, maybe the largest investment deal I've ever had. My supervisor informed me that I had to take a plane to Phoenix in order to have a face-to-face meeting with them. I was aware that doing this right was crucial. I will be out of town for 3 days. Over supper the night before my travel, I told Derek and Emma. The discussions can take a while. I was pleasantly surprised by how well the meetings in Phoenix went. Mr. Anderson accepted all of our terms, sans the custom after being pleased by my presentation. Back and forth. By the conclusion of the second day, we were signing documents, as I had anticipated. As we shook hands, he added, Mrs. Mitchell, you have a lot of work ahead of you. Sterling and Associates is lucky to have you. I was able to secure an earlier trip home by calling the airline. Would Derek not be pleased? This offer would result in a sizable bonus, perhaps enough to settle a significant portion of the mortgage early. Around 8 p.m., the cab dropped me off at our house. Derek's car was in the driveway and the lights were on upstairs. I grinned as I considered telling them the good news unexpectedly. With my heels tapping lightly on the wooden flooring, I silently opened the front door. 2 of them, together with what seemed to be Emma's shirt hanging over the banister, were on the coffee table. I climbed the stairs with a lurch in my gut. Soft conversations and the faint sound of music could be heard coming from our bedroom. I pushed the door open. Time paused. My mind was scorched by the image in front of me. Derek and Emma on our bed, entwined in the linens I picked out when we first moved here. At first, they didn't notice me. 2 encircled one another. Emma then grinned when she spotted me. Robin really grinned. Derek hastily covered himself. This isn't it. I can clarify. Emma got up without bothering to cover herself and stretched languidly. Oh, Derek, don't even try to explain. She began gathering her clothing from the ground. She would soon find out. My hands trembled as I stood still in the doorway. For what length of time? My speech sounded odd and aloof. A few weeks now, Emma remarked nonchalantly as she put on her clothing. Derek, don't you think we're in love? Derek looked like he could be ill. Emma's hand strayed to her tummy, and she continued, Oh, and there's one more thing. I'm expecting a child. A few days ago, I learned. Derek's face became white as his head jerked up. Obviously, he had never heard of this before. I muttered then more loudly, You two, leave my house? Emma chuckled. In fact, I laughed. Your home? I believe you're confused, honey. She turned and grinned viciously at me. Derek's home is here. He purchased it. Remember, you have 1 hour to pack your belongings and depart. The truth of the situation struck me as I stood there looking at my sister. All along, she had fallen into the deception. She believed she was robbing a rich man of his home. She was unaware of everything. Everything in our immediate vicinity belonged to me. I was unable to resist. I burst out laughing. The sound, a little crazy but irrepressible, erupted from somewhere deep inside me. Confusion twisted my face. Why is it so funny? You're laughing while you're being evicted from your house. I brushed away my tears while continuing to laugh. Oh, Emma, Emma, kind, naive. You believe that you and my unfaithful husband will dwell in this mansion. I own it. I purchased every single brick, tile, and piece of furniture." Emma spat. "You're lying." But I could see doubt beginning to seep into her eyes. "Derek drives a Mercedes. Mine too. He said that his previous vehicle was unprofessional for a teacher, so I purchased it last year." I looked across at Derek. "Be honest with her." Emma's glare seemed to make Derek shrink. He stared at the floor and said, "It's true. It's all Robin's. I just explained to everyone why I purchased it. Due to my desire to appear successful." Emma's face flushed brightly. She began striking Derek with one of our ornamental pillows, the ones I had spent hours choosing. "You're a liar. You useless, pitiful liar. You too? Hold on." My voice broke through as I spoke. Derek tries to protect himself while Emma cries, "I'm done with this circus. You have an hour to gather your belongings and leave my house." Derek, however, got things started. I cut in. "Don't worry about the divorce papers. I will send them to your parents' home." Immediately, the misdemeanor changed. That cunning sweetness I had become so accustomed to took the place of the anger. "You can't throw me out, Robin. Your sister is me. Your sister is expecting. What am I meant to do? I have no problem with it." I looked at my watch. "There are 55 minutes remaining. I'm going to contact the cops if you're not gone by then." They were frantically gathering their belongings when I turned and went downstairs to the kitchen. My hands were firm as I prepared myself a coffee using the fancy machine I bought last Christmas. I sat at the kitchen island, sipping carefully, listening to the noise above. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. The screen showed Mom's name. "You dare?" Before I could even greet her, she screamed, "Abandoning your expectant sister to the streets. What kind of monster are you?" My hubby was seduced by her. "Flatly," I replied. "She attempted to evict me from my home after I discovered that they had been having an affair for weeks." Then there was stillness for a moment. "Perhaps you ought to give them the house. You've succeeded. You're able to pay for a flat. Emma is now expecting a child. She requires security. It's the right thing to do. Giving the house to them." My mother's remarks left me speechless as I sat there. This is not a conversation I want to have. My voice was cold as I spoke. "Actually, at this moment, I don't want to speak with you at all." Before she could answer, I hung up and stared at my image in the dark window. It could have been for the best that I hardly recognized myself. Perhaps it was time to change and become stronger. The hour went by terribly slowly and swiftly. Doors crashed, doors slammed, and I thought I heard cries reverberating throughout the house. At last, they emerged at the foot of the stairs, each with a suitcase. Emma's eyes were hard when she looked at me, but her mascara was streaked down her face. "This is something you'll regret." She spit copiously. "You'll wind up lonely and dissatisfied because you believe that your large home and sophisticated profession make you ideal." I didn't even think to answer. Nothing else could be said. As they drove off, I observed through the window as they packed their belongings into Emma's battered Corolla. A burden was lifted off my shoulders. Knowing what was going to happen, I quickly turned off my phone. The family turmoil, the messages, the calls. At the moment, I couldn't handle any of it. I turned my phone back on in the morning, squinting at the barrage of alerts. 37 calls were not returned. 62 SMS messages, voicemails from Emma and Derek, as well as from both parents. I choose to ignore them all and call my lawyer. It's Robin Mitchell, Barbara, and I must file for divorce. Barbara, God bless her, didn't want specifics. Visit the office at 11 o'clock. We'll begin. I explained that I needed a personal day when I called into work. The Anderson transaction was being understood by my employer, had made me a favorite of his. Barbara and I went over the specifics of the divorce file for 2 hours before I left for home. I was struggling with my keys at the front entrance when I heard voices behind me. Both of my parents were there in my driveway as I turned around. Martha was crying. George's face was red with rage, and Mom and Dad appeared enraged. "How dare you toss them out?" They followed me inside, and Mom demanded, "Your own sister? Your spouse? You can't just kick a man out of his own house." I'd had enough, so George added the house he purchased. I went to my home office and took out the house documents folder. I stayed there before going back into the main room. I laid the papers on the coffee table and added, "Actually, let me show you something intriguing." I gestured at the papers, and everyone gathered around. Pay attention to the buyer's name, examine the source of the down payment, take a look at the mortgage holders. I saw their expressions as insight struck. I paid for every dime of this house, Derek's vehicle, mine too. None of it was paid for by him. However, he stated. Martha stammered he was dishonest. I said plainly. He claimed to have purchased the home because he was too insecure to acknowledge that his wife was the primary provider for the family, pretending that my achievement was his own. He has been living off of it. That little ass is lying. George blew up. His face is getting redder. This is not how I brought him up. When the in-laws departed, Mom and Dad stayed behind. I still had the papers strewn all over my coffee table, unquestionable evidence of my ownership, but for some reason they didn't care about it. Dad added, "Robin, you need to be reasonable about this," in that logical father voice I recalled from our debates as kids. "They're beginning a family." "A family?" I gave a sour laugh. "You mean my spouse and my sister's treachery, baby?" Mom yelled, "Don't be mean. You're referring to your niece or nephew. Consider the child's prospects." I finally ran out of patience and got up. "Let me clarify. I'm supposed to just give up everything I've worked for while my sister tries to steal my house and sleeps with my husband. You've been self-centered all along," Mom remarked in a shaky voice. "Always thinking for oneself. When you were small, you never shared your toys with Emma." "Mom, this has nothing to do with toys. This is my life, my home, my marriage. They destroyed if you failed to assist your sister." Dad said something. "We'll be forced to sever our relationship with you if you don't share what you have." I went over and opened the front door. "Leave now." They departed. I can still hear Mom's last words. "This is something you'll regret. Your own family." I slammed the door so violently the windows shook. The divorce process moved along really quickly. Emma persisted in trying to get me to listen through common acquaintances. Derek never made an attempt to claim any of the land. He knew better. He had seen all the documents. Fresh. All of the assets were in my name. It would be a waste of money to fight. He didn't have a lawyer. He was unable to pay the fees. I put myself into my profession, acquiring more clients and completing more significant transactions. The deal with Anderson was only the first step. I removed all traces of them when I redecorated the house. Everything is new, including the paint and furniture. I made my home office in the master bedroom where I had discovered them. In any case, I couldn't sleep there. Before I blocked them all on social media, I saw their narrative unfold like a horrible soap opera. They got married in a short ceremony at my parents' place. Emma posted numerous updates about her pregnancy, portraying the part of beaming mother-to-be. She never missed a chance to present herself as the victim, sprinkling remarks about poisonous family members and selfish sisters who abandoned their pregnant siblings. The newest picture, given by a coworker who still followed her, showed her and Derek jammed into my old childhood bedroom at our parents' house. Making the most of things was the caption. "People who are cruel live in luxury, but we have love and that's what matters." I closed the browser without reading the comments. Let them play happy family in their borrowed bedroom. Allow my parents to lavish them with attention and act as though their beloved Emma did nothing wrong. Allow them everyone to remain in their delusions. Me? I'm doing all okay. Now there is calm in the home, containing solely my belongings, decisions, and life. Silence is sometimes preferable to harmful companionship. Additionally, it's not always necessary to maintain the family you were born into. Story 3. 33 years ago, I never imagined that I would be beginning anew. I had the ideal existence, or at least it felt that way when Mike was with me. He fulfilled every desire I had. At night, he is a gifted guitarist, a brilliant doctor by day, and the sweetest person you will ever meet. We've been together for 5 years, and I honestly imagined we'd grow old together. Mike cherished his motorbike. He traded his doctor's coat for leather jackets whenever he had the chance. And I used to make fun of him for being a weekend warrior, but that's what made him who he was. This ideal combination of obligation and freedom that morning was like any other. He kissed me goodbye, got his helmet, and set off for a little ride before his hospital shift. He didn't show up for work. An automobile ran a red light. And just like that, my whole universe shattered. The initial months following the mishap remain hazy. I pushed myself into my programming job, taking on extra tasks just to keep my mind occupied. Sarah, my sister, she really supported me throughout those first few weeks, despite her tendency to be critical. She would visit me with her boys, Tommy and Jake, and their presence somehow made things a little easier. I was in this weird limbo for 3 years, just surviving, not really dating, not really living. Since Sarah has been raising the boys by herself since her divorce, my programming job kept me occupied, and I earned enough money to assist her with her expenses. His former bandmates visited last week. We occasionally get together, reminisce, and laugh about the good times. Mike's old guitar was brought out by their lead singer, Dave. Do you recall his constant insistence that music was soul medicine? Strumming a few chords, Dave posed the question. It dawned on me then. I had to do something significant, something long-lasting, to pay tribute to Mike, not only for him, but also for me. How can I take him with me? Always, while also signaling the start of my next adventure. Tattoos have never appealed to me. To be honest, I used to be fairly conservative when it came to body modifications, but for some reason, the thought of having Mike, a man with a guitar on his shoulder permanently etched on my skin, felt appropriate. It seemed like the ideal homage to the man who showed me that living life to the fullest was what it was meant to be. I was not prepared for the tattoo parlor. This looked more like a posh art studio than the gloomy, shady spot I'd always envisioned, complete with neon signs and dubious cleanliness. After hours of looking at the reference pictures I brought of Mike with his guitar, the artist Anna put me at ease. I was unable to look away from my arm. The detail was outstanding. Mike's profile, his characteristic stance with the guitar draped over his shoulder, even the faint grin he always wore while playing. It hurt like hell, but it was worth every second. The tattoo healed well after 2 weeks. I thought it was time to visit Sarah and the boys. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when I pulled up to Sarah's house. I was wearing a long-sleeved light jacket. The minute I knocked, I heard Tommy and Jake thundering down the stairs. And Tasha. Tommy practically tackled me with a hug. He was still quite excited about seeing his family at the age of 12. Jake hung back, attempting to keep his cool as a 15-year-old, but he couldn't help but smile. "Hey, Aunt Tosh." Behind them, Sarah showed up, clearly delighted to see me. The time was ideal. I just prepared lunch. The house was warm, and I shrugged off my jacket without thinking I was wearing my favorite short-sleeved t-shirt underneath. And suddenly the room went quiet. Well, temporarily calm, before Tommy's enthusiastic cry disturbed the air. "No way is that Uncle Mike!" He rushed over to examine my arm. "That's so cool." "It has his guitar and everything, Jake." Jake moved closer to his teenage reserve. "Forgotten." "That's actually really awesome." "Aunt Tasha, it looks just like him." That's when Sarah's voice sliced through the boys' enthusiasm like ice. "Tasha, what were you thinking?" That is simply unsightly. I can't believe you do something so irreversible without consulting anyone." I felt my face flush, but I held my boy steady. "Sarah, I didn't have to ask around. It's my body. and I'll determine what to do with it." She might have frozen me with the look she gave me, but she remained silent. We sat down to lunch, and although the lads started asking questions about the tattoo and discussing their greatest memories of might, Sarah sat there, exuding disdain every time I caught her sight. She was gazing at my arm like it had specifically insulted her. I attempted to keep the topic light, telling the lads about Mike's first terrible effort at teaching me guitar and how he'd ultimately given up, and advised I should stick to coding. Sarah simply shoved her food about her plate as they giggled. It was approximately 8 when my phone rang. Mom's name showed on the screen, and I knew immediately what was coming. Sarah must have texted her the minute I'd taken off my jacket. Tasha. Mom's voice was that unique blend of judgment and disappointment that she had honed over the years. "I just heard from your sister about what you did to yourself. I must admit that I am not at all in favor of it. What were you contemplating?" I inhaled deeply. "I'm 30 years old, Mum. I can make decisions regarding my own body without your permission." When she's extremely irritated, she always produces that tiny snort. Then she hung up without saying anything else. The weeks after the tattoo unveiling passed quickly, filled with deadlines and code. I had to spend many hours at home in front of my computer since I was overseeing a significant project for a new customer. Having a reason to avoid seeing Sarah and dealing with further stress around my tattoo was almost a relief. However, the project gradually stabilized, and I was unable to continue avoiding my household responsibilities. On Saturday afternoon, I went to Sarah's place as usual. I could tell something wasn't right as soon as she opened the door. She had that tense expression on her face when she's going to argue. When I entered the living room, Tommy and Jake were playing video games. They leaped to meet me, but Sarah interrupted their excitement. She said, "Go upstairs, boys," in a tone that made no space for disagreement. "I need to talk to your aunt seriously." They headed upstairs after exchanging anxious glances, the type that children give when they know something bad is going to happen. Their door closing reverberated throughout the suddenly quiet home. "What's happening?" Sincerely perplexed, I inquired. Sarah scowled at me while crossing her arms. "Tommy asked me something yesterday, do you know? When he reached 16, he wanted to know if he could have a tattoo." 16 before Jake said that he had been browsing tattoo artists on the internet. They're only children, Sarah. In any case, they cannot acquire tattoos without their parents' permission. I attempted to persuade her that, like me, they will make their own decisions regarding their bodies when they are adults. Their own decisions. Sarah's tone went up a note. "Before you arrived with that, they had never discussed tattoos. That item on your arm. You are solely to blame for this." I inhaled deeply. "Hurry up. Sarah, these days you can see tattoos everywhere. At the grocery store, half of the patrons had them. At school, the boys most likely witnessed scores of people with tattoos every day. I can't really be held responsible for their curiosity. You dare not attempt to explain this." Sarah was trembling uncontrollably. "Right now, you don't know what you've begun. They'll want tattoos first. What comes next? It seems great, so they'll start smoking. They will then begin to drink, and they'll be doing drugs before you realize it." As I stood in Sarah's living room, I had the impression that I had entered a parallel universe where having a tattoo was the same as corrupting children. "This is absurd, Sarah." I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. "Never in my life have I smoked a cigarette. I spend 4 days a week at the gym. Kombucha is the most unusual beverage I consume. Are you aware of all this? It makes no difference." Sarah's cheeks were flushed. "Right now. You've changed, that much is true, and this has been on my mind a lot." As she often did before saying anything she believes would make her seem authoritative, she straightened her back. "I no longer want you to visit my home. My boys are negatively impacted by you." In fact, I laughed. That or we'd have to cry. A negative affect due to a tattoo. Do you even hear yourself now, Sarah? Don't make fun of me. She lost her temper. "I mean it. I want you to go. I also don't want you to return." I grabbed my handbag and exclaimed, "This is crazy. You are aware that you are exaggerating the situation. Give me a call after you've regained consciousness." That day, I left her house with the impression that I was in a strange dream. Hell just had a basic tattoo. This family-destroying drama at home evolved from a lovely work of art honoring Mike. I made an effort to comprehend what had occurred. Even for Sarah, who had always been the most conventional of us, this response felt out of proportion. Nevertheless, I assumed she had finally calmed down. She needed to write. So, as usual, I continued to give her the monthly utility money. After all, the fact that she was being absurd about my tattoo shouldn't have a negative impact on her financial circumstances. But as the days stretched into weeks, I began to find that Sarah's response wasn't the only thing that bothered me. Neither Tommy nor Jake had contacted me. No calls, no messages, and no pointless memes. Usually, they sent me. They simply vanished. The guys who used to FaceTime me at least twice a week. I tried sending them lighthearted texts. "Hello, how are things doing with your science project? Work? Have you yet to complete that insurmountable level in your game?" However, there was just quiet. The fact that Sarah had most likely prohibited them from getting in touch with me was obvious to anybody. I was furious at the idea of her using the children as players in this absurd argument. 2 months passed slowly. I immersed myself into my job and took on additional tasks, anything to divert my attention from the circumstance. But I was unable to ignore the family conflict any longer as Thanksgiving drew near. Mom usually calls weeks in advance to arrange the meals and other preparations, but this year she didn't call. Most likely, she simply forgot. Despite the fact that my mother had always invited me to Thanksgiving throughout my adult life, I reminded myself, everyone has had a busy time. So I took my usual action, yet considerate presents for Sarah and the boys as well as for everyone else. I purchased Jake the pricey painting tools he required for his portfolio, and Tommy the new game system he had been pleading for. I even got Sarah that fancy coffee maker she'd been eyeing but couldn't justify buying for herself, loading up my car with the goodies. I made an effort to be optimistic. They wouldn't let Thanksgiving be marred by a tattoo, surely. This was the most important holiday for our family. We all got together for the one time of year. Regardless, I had managed to attend Thanksgiving dinner even 3 years prior, when I was hardly able to function due to Mike's death. When I arrived at my parents' place, the trunk was brimming with thoughtfully wrapped presents, the sight of Mom's Thanksgiving decorations, which is a familiar sight. She has owned the same porcelain turkey since I was a child. I smiled at the porch's pumpkins and fall wreaths, but my smile vanished as soon as I entered the front door. As soon as I entered the scene, I felt uneasy. Even though Sarah, her parents, and the boys were there was an odd tension in the air rather than the typical Thanksgiving mayhem. They gazed at me as if I were a ghost that had suddenly appeared in their living room. "Tasha." There was a biting edge to Mom's voice. "Why are you here?" I felt more and more foolish as I stood there with my arms full of gift bags. "What are you saying?" "It's Thanksgiving. I brought gifts for everyone." You weren't invited." Mom spoke gently, like if speaking to a little kid. "We assumed you would comprehend. You were thus not expected to attend." All of a sudden, the present seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. "You get it? Know what? How come I wouldn't receive an invitation to Thanksgiving?" Sarah moved ahead, crossed arms. I became aware that the males were not concentrating on me at that point. Their shoulders were bent as they gazed at the ground. Sarah stated that we don't need you flaunting that tattoo and giving my kids more erroneous notions about proper conduct. I put the presents down more forcefully than I should have. "Do you mean me?" "We're not done yet. Months have passed. It's only a tattoo. Only a tattoo." Sarah raised the pitch of her voice. "It represents disdain and revolt." God, oh God. Frustrated, I raked my hands through my hair. "Are you all listening?" Uncle Jim is completely covered in tattoos. Last month, cousin Rachel was crowned with a huge phoenix. Regarding those, no one spoke. Mom immediately hopped in, but Dad shuffled uneasily in his seat. That's not the same. Tasha, you ought to have asked us first. You are aware of our feelings regarding these matters. I thought I was going crazy. You were consulted? I'm 30 years old. Why would I need to contact anybody about what I do with my own body? Since we are a part of your family, Sarah shouted. Since we are moral beings. Since deeds have repercussions. The only repercussions here are the ones you're making. I could feel tears of frustration swelling up. I have a special meaning for this tattoo. It's for Mike. I do everything to keep him at my side, of paying tribute to him. Sarah uttered it at that moment, the words that would make all the difference. She scoffed. Oh, don't start with that again. In any case, I never liked him. Acting like a wannabe rock star while going around on that death trap motorbike and flaunting that dumb instrument. She chuckled harshly. What do you know? I'm happy that automobile struck him. Perhaps now is the time for you to mature and begin behaving like an adult. The room whirled around me. I found my voice even though I was having trouble breathing. Express regret, I insisted. My statements began as a whisper before becoming more forceful. You should immediately apologize for your remarks regarding Mike. Defiantly, Sarah raised her chin. I'm not going to apologize for being honest. Mom, Dad, I want her out of here. Thanksgiving is being ruined by her. I stared at my parents as I waited for them to defend me. Instead, chastised Sarah for her nasty remarks about Mike. Mom got to her feet, shakily straightening her skirt. I think you should leave, Tasha. Silently, she said. My father avoided making eye contact. My mother's lips formed a thin line, Sarah's triumphal look, and my nephew's bewildered expressions without a word as I gazed at them all. After gathering all of the gift bags I had brought, I left. It was a hazy trip to the nearby homeless shelter. I hardly recall giving the gifts to the astonished volunteer at the entrance. All of these are brand new. I gave a robotic explanation. The coffee machine, the art tools, and the game system. Nothing has been unlocked. Back home, I sat in my dark living room for hours thinking about all the monthly electricity payments I've been making for Sarah since her divorce. The Christmas traditions we'd initiated last year's vacation to Hawaii are still vivid in my memory. Tommy's enthusiasm when he saw the water for the first time, Jake's endless shots of the sunset. For once, Sarah is truly unwinding. In order to surprise them on Christmas morning, I had previously made reservations for this year's vacation to Europe. It was more than simply the travels, though. The monthly power bills that inexplicably continued to be paid even while Sarah was between jobs, the additional tuition I paid for when Jake struggled with maths, the summer camp fees, the frequent shopping sprees for the boys' school outfits, and the college money. 2 years of cautious saving, making sure my nephews would have alternatives when they completed high school. At that moment, I wondered what Mike would say if he could see everything. He would most likely laugh about karma before taking it seriously and reminding me that love shouldn't be one-sided. I felt oddly at ease as I opened my laptop. Sarah's email essentially wrote itself. I've had time to reflect about what transpired today, Sarah, and I want to make some clear decisions. You believe that I'm such a bad influence, therefore I'm going to stop paying you monthly utility payments. You wouldn't want to depend on my funds, I'm sure. I've canceled our Christmas vacation to Europe, at least for you and the boys. I'm going by myself. I've been saving money for Tommy and Jake's college education for the last 2 years. Since you are worried that I may have influenced them, I will be shutting these accounts and using the funds for other investments. I'm hoping you'll tell the boys why this year's Christmas surprises won't be coming. Feel free to tell them it's because their aunt's tattoo makes her an inappropriate influence on their life. Tasha. As soon as I pushed send, I shut off my phone. My head was clear, but my hands were trembling. For the first time since Mike died, I felt like I was standing up for myself. Truly standing up for myself. I looked at my phone for a long time the next morning before turning it on. Instantly, the notifications began to pour in. 37 calls were not returned, 63 SMS messages, 22 voicemails. Sarah's message was the first one I opened. "How dare you do this to my children? Because you're upset with me, you have no right to punish them. Give me a call back right now." Then came Mom's SMS. "Tasha, this is blatantly self-centered behavior. This is not how we brought you up. You're allowing this family to be destroyed by a tattoo." Although Dad's message was shorter, it was just as full of remorse. "Your sister needs the money. Consider the lads." I read message after message, each one requesting an explanation, an apology, or a reaction. None of them, however, expressed regret for their treatment of me on Thanksgiving or recognized Sarah's hurtful remarks about Mike. Approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was shocked out of my work by an aggressive knock. I had been attempting to bury myself in the code, but my focus was broken by Sarah's voice coming through to her. "Oh, now, Tasha, open this door." Sarah's voice reverberated throughout the flat. "We must have a real discussion." I heard my mother's voice. "Please, sweetheart, let's have an adult conversation about this. I'd rather not speak to any of you." With a voice more steady than I felt, I called back, "Leave now, please. You're acting malevolently." Tears broke in Sarah's voice. "You're taking revenge. Consider Jake and Tommy." Instead of answering, I retired to my home office and put on my noise-canceling headphones, leaving the corridor to their dramatics. Their voices finally trailed off. It was like psychological warfare for the next 2 weeks. There were fresh attempts to weaken my determination every day. My phone turned to become a battleground for manipulation, guilt, and mishaps. Linda then called, "Honey, family is the most important thing. For something so trivial, you can't toss it away." "Mark," a cousin texted, "Tash, please just say you're sorry and put this right. Family must remain united." Uncle Peter made a subsequent attempt. "Your mum is inconsolable. Is your family truly worth ruining for this?" I pushed the end call button or erased the message whenever family was brought up. The fact that I didn't cause any of the destruction doesn't seem to register with any of them. Family members were not barred because of body art by me. It wasn't me who had made fun of a deceased man's memory. The stress increased as Christmas drew near. New contact efforts, each more urgent than the last, were made every day. However, when Sarah surprised me outside my flat building one morning, it was a whole other level. "Please, Tasha, we must speak," she yelled as she hurried through the light to me. "Snow in December. What I mentioned about Mike has been on my mind. Those were inappropriate things for me to say. I apologize. I quit fiddling with my shoulder-mounted work bag. Given the time, the words I had been waiting for weeks now seemed empty. Sarah, are you truly sorry? What? Do you regret that I no longer cover your expenses? I apologize for canceling the vacation to Europe. I'm sorry the boy's college money is gone." She blushed. "It's unfair. I shouldn't be the reason the boy is punished." There was no humor in my laughter. "What's unfair, you ask? Because of a tattoo, you forbade me from visiting them. You expressed your satisfaction with their Uncle Mike's passing, but all of a sudden you want to make apologies now that the money is gone." "The money for college," she said. Her voice broke. "You can't just. For their future, that is. You're correct. Yes, it was. But you say I'm a negative influence. That would also make my money bad, wouldn't it? We wouldn't want your kids' futures to be ruined by my shady tattoo money, would we?" Sarah's face became purple instead of red. "You're not entitled. Not at all." I interrupted her. "Sarah, they are your words. Your reasoning. My money must be equally corrupting if I'm such a bad influence that I can't be around the lads. Here, I'm just taking your lead. This isn't the same." She blew up. "They are currently being educated in this way. This is the result of your decisions. You can't have both of them. Either everything connected to me is detrimental, or I'm a negative influence, or I'm their devoted aunt who wishes to assist them. Select one. I paused at the main desk before turning and entering my building. "Jerry," I said to the concierge who had been keeping an eye on our building for the last 10 years. "Here, my parents and sister are no longer welcome. Don't allow them come to my floor, please. When Christmas arrived, I was alone myself for the first time in my life. Not quite alone, though. Paris, Rome, and Barcelona were where I spent it. I didn't share any photos on social media, but I heard Sarah and my parents complaining to anybody who would listen about their egotistical daughter leaving her family for a tattoo. However, I came to a realization when standing on a bridge in Venice and watching the sunset turn the canals a beautiful pink. The tattoo was no longer the point of this. It might not have been. Control and poisonous family dynamics were at the heart of this, even before I had the picture of my kingdom on my arm. I did something that I should have done 3 years ago, the day I got back from Europe. I scheduled a session with a therapist. The office of Dr. Martinez was cozy and welcoming, not at all like the cold stereotype I had in mind. "Tell me why you're here," she asked in a kind, yet businesslike tone. I inadvertently touched my tattoo. I have some stuff to sort out, mostly family matters. I also need to figure out how to remember the person I lost while letting go of him. She waited for me to finish by nodding. Mike was someone I adored. I suppose you still adore him. However, I am aware that he would not want me to dwell on the past. For the first time since his passing, he has consistently said that life was supposed to be lived with courage. I feel as though I'm truly doing that, defending my rights and making decisions for myself, rather than merely following the wishes of others. Glancing down at the tattoo of Mike playing his guitar that had, in some way, started this whole change on my arm, I came to a significant realization. This was more than simply a Mike memorial. It had come to represent my power and my capacity to defend myself, my readiness to live my life as I see fit. With the guitar always draped over his shoulder, the tattoo and the microphone appeared to be grinning back at me, doing what he loved, forever frozen in that moment of happiness. He'd always dwell in my heart. However, it could have been time to discover what other delights life had in store for me.